Meditation in Judaism was always there, and it's actually a tool to become aware of our soul and also the soul of the world, as we've discussed in the previous lessons. And this brings us to an acknowledgement and a recognition, an awareness of purpose. It's in our conscious that we recognize that God created the world, God guides the world, and God brings us to creation for a purpose. But I want to take this moment to mention that the goal of Jewish meditation is not to escape. A lot of people, when they take meditation, it's because the pressure of life and the environment around them is increasingly difficult, and they're looking for a way to get away from it. So meditation is like an escape. It's like going on vacation. It's like entering into a zone where they feel totally protected. And while they're in that zone, they block everything out and they feel good and they have the energy to see themselves, to be aware of themselves. And hopefully once they get out of that island of meditation, they can actually re-enter the world. Jewish meditation is quite different. Jewish meditation is not the escape, but rather to reframe our minds. As we learned last week, that hitbonenut is also rooted in bina, which bina is not only understanding and comprehension, but bina is also the idea of binyan, of rebuilding our minds, reframing our way of thinking. So in this lesson, we're actually going to address a common problem, which a lot of people use meditation for, but we're going to see how Judaism views it. And we're going to call it the scattered soul. Now, really, the proper word that many people will use it is the scattered brain. And when I say the scattered brain means that people have a hard time focusing. They have a hard time concentrating. There are too many distractions out there. And for them to be able to focus is very, very difficult. We're going to call it scattered soul because really it goes back to the soul. And in order to look at it properly, we're going to put up 5 different activities. And I'd like everybody, whether you are here in the room with me or whether you are watching in the comfort of your own home or office, and you are on the virtual connection, but you see the screen, to take an honest assessment of yourself and look at these 5 activities and say, to what degree am I fully engaged and fully present in that activity? So we will go according to the way it's in the book on page 116. You could look at the screen as well. The first question is, how engaged are you when you read a book? Now, I have to say that a lot of people today, when we say read a book, many people don't even know what a book is because they know what a Kindle is, or they read articles or books on their device. And one of the traps of reading an article on your device is that you're always opening up another page. You want to see what's going on elsewhere. So the question is, when you're reading something, how engaged are you in that activity? Rate it from 1 to 5. 5 means fully engaged. 1 is the least engaged. Second one is a little bit more sensitive, and that has to do with prayer. When you walk into the synagogue or you pray at home and you are opening up the prayer book and you're reciting the prayers, religious people do this every day. How engaged are you in the prayers? How focused are you when you're reading the words? Is your mind wandering, thinking about other things? Remember the first class that we had, we mentioned that the rabbi, after the Amidah prayer, walked over to one of the congregants and extended his hand and he said, Shalom Aleichem, welcome back. He says, I haven't gone anywhere. He says, I observed you during your prayer and you were visiting every business location all over the world where you have business and you actually weren't thinking about the prayer. So now, when a person is in need, no question about it. If a person is under stress, a person has a request from God. So when they're praying, they are totally engaged. But we're talking about on average when someone is in the synagogue praying, how engaged are they? Another thing is a phone call with friends. Now, in the olden days, and we're not that old, but in the olden days, most phones were on landlines. When you had a landline, you had the receiver, you held it next to your ear and mouth, and you didn't do anything else. You were engaged in conversation. Today, many people, when they answer a phone, they're doing it on a smartphone. Well, a smartphone has many other distractions. So they're in the middle of playing a game or reading an article, and they're also speaking on the phone. And by the way, many people are very sensitive to that because they realize that when they're talking to someone else, the person is not really engaged. They say, yeah, can you repeat it again? Because really their mind is somewhere else. So they're talking on the phone. And then there are other people that are really engaged. Now, if someone insults you or someone says something negative about you, then you're fully engaged. We're talking about regular conversations. How focused are we when we're engaged in a phone conversation? Here's another one that I've noticed quite often. When you're on the checkout line in the supermarket. Now, it used to be on the checkout line in the supermarket, they had all these tabloids there so that people that were waiting in the long lines, and in some parts of this country, when you stand in a supermarket line, it could be very long. So they want you to buy the tabloids, so they have all these sensational tabloids out there, and you pick one up and you start reading it, hopefully with the intent that you'll buy it. And if you didn't buy it, at least you read it and you knew the advertisements. Question is, how engaged are you in the moment? Maybe you're meeting people. Maybe you notice, yesterday I was in a line of a convenience store, and there was a person there that was struggling to find change to pay whatever he was buying. And the person behind him, which was in front of me, said right away, he was so engaged, and he said, you know what, I'll take care of it. I have some extra money, don't worry about it. And the man was ashamed, and he said, no, I have these coins, those coins. But the point was that the person behind was totally engaged because he noticed that the person in front of him was struggling. So the question is, how engaged are we? And the fifth item is, when we're at work, how engaged are we in work? And today, of course, a lot of work is done hands-on, but then there's also a lot of work that's done on the computer. And when you're on the computer, or even if you're in this class right now, how many of us are actually engaged in what's going on now, and how many of us are actually reading something else? So this is a question, how engaged are we? In Hebrew, it's called pizar nefesh because it's the scattering of the soul. So it's very interesting that this is not a problem that started in our days. This is a problem that goes back thousands of years. Here's a commentary from a great rabbi, the Bartanura, Rabbi Vadia Bartanura, who lived in the 15th and 16th century, and he's commenting on the Mishnah on Avot. Please open up to page 117, text number 1. And over there it talks about a chassid. A chassid is someone that goes, who's pious. And he says, our pious fellow would often pray, may God protect me from enduring a scattered soul. People in earshot would ask, what is a scattered soul? He would respond, those who own many assets that are located in several divergent locations are forced to divide their attention to stay atop of all of them at once, causing the soul to scatter its energies. If you're busy multitasking and doing a lot of things, and you have engagements in a lot of different places, and everything is coming at you at one time, so you feel very scattered. And that's one of the things that causes a lot of pressure on people. They may have a cutoff time, which they used to call a deadline for this article. Then they have this task that they have to accomplish. The phone is ringing. Then they have a crisis. They have an emergency. The family wants them. And all of a sudden, they feel so scattered that they cannot focus. Today's time, it's even more. Why is today's time even more significant? Is because the very tool and instrument that was created to make life easier, and in many ways it does make life easier, also is much more challenging and much more demanding. So today, if you want to book a flight, you don't even have to do anything. You can sit in your chair, pull out your smartphone, go online and book a flight, get different prices, you get the boarding pass, and it's all done. You don't even have to speak to an agent. So that makes life even more convenient. If you want to check on a family member that was on a trip and you want to find out if they're okay, you WhatsApp them and they respond to you immediately. However, on the other hand, The smartphone is always buzzing if you allow it to, and it's always giving you news. So if you receive news information, it's constantly telling you the latest headline. And if it's somebody that's trying to get you and is leaving you a WhatsApp or a message, it buzzes and you feel like you have to answer it. The telephone is ringing, you have to answer it. They leave voicemail, you have to answer it. So all of a sudden, the tool that's there or was created to make life easier is now more challenging and leaves us even more scattered. And what happens is, as a result of that, we do things very quickly. Now, swiftness in Judaism is a virtue. There's a comment that says, Zrizin makdim el mitzvahs, that those that are swift, they do the mitzvah immediately. You don't procrastinate. If you're going to help someone, there's a funny story. I shouldn't say it's funny, but a poor man once knocked on a door, and the host opened up the door, and the man said, I'm starving. I haven't eaten in 3 days. I'm about to collapse. And the man said, wow, what a mitzvah I have that I can restore the life of this individual. And he began to count in his mind how many great virtues there are. And by the time he finished counting, he hadn't made it yet to the kitchen. The man collapsed. So there are times that you have to be very quick. You're not slow. However, in processing information, in conversations with people, we are very dismissive. We're on a phone conversation and the person is really expressing an urgent desire to talk to us and we don't have the time, we cut them off. Or if somebody sends us a note and we really need to be able to study it, we don't have time, so we just peruse it. We say, we got it, yeah, and it's fine. Meanwhile, we missed out vital information. So therefore, one of the things that meditation does is helps us slow down and focus. So there's a play on words here. If you look at page 118, text 2. So in the Shema, it says, that if God forbid, when the people in Israel would sin, they would be lost. They would be swiftly eradicated, and they would be sent into exile. Comes along the Baal Shem Tov, and he says, in addition to the regular and simple meaning of this word, there is also another deeper meaning, that we always must maintain a settled mind and not be in a rush. He referred to the verse, you will be swiftly eradicated. The Hebrew word, instead of saying swiftly eradicate, is eradicate swiftness. In other words, be a little slow, be more methodical, think it through, think about what the moment is calling for. Now, this is a very important goal, but it's easier said than done. Now, when someone has exploded and they're angry, you're not going to go to them and say, listen, mellow down, slow down, calm down, relax. That's the worst thing to do. There's a statement in the Mishnah that says, do not comfort the mourner before the dead has been buried. In other words, when they're full of anguish and they're in the moment, very upset, your kind words are actually going to be more irritating than calming or helpful. What we're talking about is how one should train themselves to be able to meditate and slow down. Now, here's where we get to meditation. The classical meaning of meditation, even in Jewish sources, and then we're going to go to a deeper level of meditation, which is even greater than that. So we're going to go on the surface level, how most people see meditation, and even Judaism to a certain extent sees it. But as I say, this is on the surface level. So one of the things that psychologists and therapists and wise counsel says to you is live in the moment, live in the present. Push away the concerns of the future. Don't let it bog you down. Deal with now, deal with today, deal with what you're dealing with right now. Don't let the past burden you as well. Yeah, there might be a million things that you have to take care of, but if you allow yourself to be aware of what you have to do now, then you'll be fine. And this is a practice that is commonly referred to as mindfulness. And mindfulness actually is a way to reduce stress. And it's something which has been around for a while, even though it's originally a Buddhist practice, but now today it's a technique that is accepted by everybody. And we're still going to get to the deeper mystical aspect of it, but that's the concept of mindfulness. Now, Judaism taught this simple concept of mindfulness a long time ago. And I'm going to give you a little introduction. If you turn to page 120, text number 3. Just because we're learning about this, it's really not relevant to the reading itself, but since it's mentioned, I have to explain it. So this is a parenthetical, historical little piece before we read. Has anyone ever heard of Ben Sirach or Sirach? Ben Sirach, according to tradition, was actually a child that came into being from Jeremiah's daughter. We're not going to go into the details how he was born. And he wrote writings in Hebrew that were very similar to the writings and the style of writings that we find in the Tanakh, in the book of Mishlei, which is known in English as Proverbs. And it was never accepted as part of the Torah, as part of the 24 books of scripture. But there are times that there are some references that are made there that are acceptable. The Gemara in Sanhedrin talks about the fact that one is obligated to make life purposeful, and the readings that they read should be proper. So it tells you what books to read, and it tells you what books basically to avoid. But when it came to the book of Ben Sirach, let's give a look what it says in text number 3. Rabbi Yosef stated, even though he said before, don't read it, he said, there are still valuable passages within the book of Ben Sirach that may be taught. One of them is, grieve not over tomorrow's woes, for you know not what a day may bring. You may not be alive tomorrow, and you're worrying about a world in which you may not belong. There's a lot of explanation to this. One of it is that we're worried about the tomorrow, and we don't even know if we're going to be in the picture. So why worry about it? The second thing is, it might be the very object that we're worried about won't be in existence anymore. The what ifs. What if I go on the road and I hit traffic? What if my plane is delayed? What if this person is not going to receive me or accept me? So the statement here is, you don't even know what things are going to be. Why are you worrying about things that have no meaning whatsoever? And then you go further, that there's a verse that says, it reads very well in Hebrew. So I'll read it first in Hebrew and then in English. If you look at page 120, it's written by the Yosef Ometz. Ha'avar ayin, ha'atid adayin, va'oev abahoheveh keheref ayin, imken da'agam inayin. It sort of translates, the past is no longer here. The future has yet to appear. In a blink, the present will disappear. So what case is there for fear? There's a similar saying in our American English world, and it says the following: the clock is running, make the most of today. Time waits for no man. Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery. Today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. So these are all little meditations that help people say, okay, find the meditation that blocks out all of the noise, that blocks out all of the pressure, so that you're able to deal with the now. The truth of the matter is that it sounds fantastic, but I want to say something that actually is very interesting. You know, we all talk about the concept of rest and vacation. The Rebbe, who had a very difficult workload, to the point that he would sleep just a few hours a night, and he would personally answer thousands upon thousands of letters, plus study and write and edit and manage Jewish life all over the world. I heard this from my father, who was one of the Rebbe's secretaries, that in 1970, the Rebbe was so overworked that the secretariat, the whole group, decided that it might be worthwhile for the Rebbe to take a vacation for 2 weeks. And they found a good place out on the island, and they made sure that there will be a minyan there, that he would be able to have his prayers, but this way he can rest and relax. And they came in with the proposal. And the Rebbe said to them a few things. Number one, that means that I'm cut off from the society. If there's an emergency and people need something, it'll be very hard for them to get to me. Secondly, I won't be able to answer letters that are coming to me or requests, which means that when I come back, my workload will be double, triple, quadruple than what it's now. So what is the use of vacation? In the same sense, if someone takes a vacation to get a break and think that life is going to be better once they come back, it's a mistake. If they take the vacation because they need to rest and they're reaching burnout and they have to stop, I understand. I'm not against that. I think it's a fantastic thing, but that's not an ultimate answer. If we give a look here with meditation, if meditation is a form of living in a moment and we escape from the reality, then what have we accomplished? Because when you get out of that cocoon and that bubble and you come back into the reality, it hits you again. So you have a little bit more energy to deal with it, but you're not going to resolve it. So what's the benefit of that kind of meditation? And if it's grounded in the truth, it's still a bubble, then it's just a Band-Aid. It's not something which really resolves the issue. What we want to talk about, sorry about that. If what we want to talk about is something that, as we said before, binyan, that changes our framework of what mindfulness really is. In other words, not just to escape a stress, not just to put a Band-Aid on it, but to do something that really trains us each and every day in how to practice meditation and deal with the now and the present. And here's where we're going to go to. Now, before I go here, I want to say something that's not in the text. I was once traveling on an American Airlines flight, and that's when they still gave out the American Airline magazine. I forget what it was. Today, nobody has a magazine, whether it's because of COVID or because people have their own devices. But there was an article there from a lady actually living in Boone who wrote how she discovered the Sabbath. And one of the benefits of Shabbat is that you cut yourself off from all electronic devices. So you're not in touch with the news. You're not reading email. You're not listening to messages. You're basically able to focus. So there is that mechanism that we have built in Jewish life for a Shabbat. But that, again, is only once a week. What's about the rest of the week? So what we're going to do today is show how every day and every moment one can actually connect with it and reframe how we see it. And this is where we're going to go to. This is a philosophical idea, which is very true in Judaism, and that is the following, that when we look at creation, so we look at the story of creation in the book of Genesis, what are the first 3 words in the Bible in English? I was once driving on the highway in Winston-Salem, and there was this religious radio show, and they were giving away free Bibles if you knew the first 3 words of the Bible in English. So I was listening to see how many people knew or didn't know. Now, the English is not correct because that's not what it says in the Hebrew. But let's say, what are the first 3 words in English? In the beginning. So usually when you think about creation, you think that there was a beginning of time and God created it. So when God created, he created the world and it's there, it's in existence. He manages at times he doesn't manage it. Sometimes he allows it on autopilot. That's the way the world thinks. The truth of the matter is that it's not so at all. It's not an ancient activity that happened. And we're going to read a fascinating wording. The creation is an ongoing process. Please look on page 121, written by Rabbi Yeshaya Levi Hur, what's known as the Shalah, a foremost Kabbalistic scholar whose writings have influenced Hasidus as well. So he writes the following: a common perception is that God created everything out of absolute nothingness, and that in the beginning of creation, God imparted to the host of heaven, in other words, the forces of nature, the power and ability to run the world. The world thus operates according to its manner, as if God has let go of his creation. It is only that occasionally God may want to desire to override the natural order. As long as God does not override it, the world runs in the power it obtained from the time of creation. So even people that believe in God and people that believe in creation, many of these believers have this idea of creation. So override means that if nature, for instance, dictates that there should be illness and somebody becomes ill, you pray to God that you should override the illness. If nature says that there will be a deterioration of some sort of situation, you ask God to override. The Jews, Israelites, were slaves. God overrode nature, took them out of slavery. They came to the Sea of Reeds, the Yam Suf, and there was no way out, so God overrode nature and made a miracle. But the Shalah says that is not correct according to Judaism. That is absolutely a misperception. The proper belief, he says, is that God in his goodness renews each day. This is actually a phrase out of the prayer. I don't know how to say it in Hebrew. We recite this every morning before the recital of Shema. We say the words, HaMechadesh Betuvo, B'chol Yom Tamid Ma'aseh Bereshit, which translate the one who renews each and every day steadily the actions of creation. In other words, the first act of creation is a constant. God is actively directing his flow of vitality. Furthermore, should God cease to do so even for an instant, all would be as naught. Its existence would be utterly nullified. This is a text that is very common in Jewish ideas, and we're going to talk about this even more as we get to 6. But before we do that, I want to stop for a meditation for a moment, just to let this actually sink in. One second, we're not up to the meditation yet. Sorry, we're not up to the meditation. Give a look at the screen right now. So you see a screen within a screen, and obviously, just like as the screen is here, there's a projector that's projecting the image on the screen, right? If the projector is turned off, it would stop existing. Now, when we're dealing with a painting, we're painting ink or paint on the screen, it's talked about before. So it's there. Creation is a bit different. And let's talk about this for a moment, because this is a theological concept that we need to understand for a moment, because the world is a real world. But in regards to God, the world is only an eminent reflection of the divine light that comes from God. And let's talk about this for a moment, because this is very important. And we're not going to study a text, so I'm just going to say it by heart, and then we'll get to the text. So bear with me for a moment. I hope everybody can follow with me. Maimonides, one of the greatest Jewish theologians, scholars, and scientists, at the beginning of his famous work of the 14 volumes of the Mishneh Torah, after his introduction, says the following. He says that the foundation of all foundations and the pillar of all wisdoms is that each and every one of us is obligated to know that there's the first being, and the first being brings everything into being. And he describes what's the difference between the first being, which is God, to the creation, or everything that emanates from God. And it's termed in the following words. God is what we refer to as a mandatory existence. In other words, the existence of God is mandated just by his very being. There couldn't be a situation that God doesn't exist. He is muchuyav, he is mandated that he has to be. It's not optional, it has to be. All of creation is what's called efsharut hametziut. It's the potential for existence, and only with God's will can it exist. In the world of God, which is the mandatory existence, the question is, where does God not exist? Is there a theoretical place that God does not exist? And what is the answer to that? No. Because if you say that there is an area that is void of God, that means that God is not truly the mandatory existence. Mandatory existence means that if there is space, the existence of God is there. In the existence of God, there's truly no room for anything else to exist. Because the moment you say something else exists means that that existence is taking up a space physically, mentally, spiritually, which is void of God, and that's impossible. So in order for creation to happen, God needs to override that concept that there could be an existence outside of him and force the existence to come into being. And that is called the light of God that emanates from God. And that light, which emanates from God, causes the existence to take place. And as long as God wills it and is creating it, it actually is in existence. The moment God withdraws, it doesn't exist anymore. So we're using the example of the light of the projector only to explain one aspect of it. And that aspect is that as long as the projector is shining the light and its beam, the existence is there. The moment it doesn't, it's not there. The same thing is true with a flashlight. If you take a flashlight, and as children, we always used to do that. You're at night, you're shining the flashlight, and it's shining a beam. But you want the beam to stop, you put your hand over the cover of the flashlight, over the face of the flashlight. What happens? The light stops. Your hand might look red, but the light stops. Why? Because you're cutting off the beam. So in a sense, the creation cannot exist if it's not constantly flowing from God, which means to say that the energy that's coming into this universe, as we mentioned last week, is not static, it's dynamic. It's something that is always being renewed at every moment. And we're soon going to see the technical aspect of that and how it's connected to breathing. So the idea is that the existence is happening the entire time. God is constantly pulsating new energy into the world. And it requires constant upkeep. I want you to look on page 23 from Shara Yichud V'Emunah from Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi, that he actually says it explicitly in a very powerful way, in a very bold way. And he says, herein lies the answer to those who deny individual divine providence and the miracles recorded in the Torah, and the root of their error. They err in comparing the work of God, the creator of heaven and earth, to the work of man and his schemes. When a silversmith has completed crafting a vessel, that vessel is no longer dependent on the hands of the craftsman. And even when his hands are removed from it and he goes on his way, the vessel remains in exactly the same image and form as when it left the hands of the smith. These fools conceive the creation of heaven and earth in the same way. Now, by the way, even people that believe in miracles also make the mistake, but the difference is that they believe in miracles that God intercedes and changes the pace of nature. The truth of the matter is that even if you believe in a miracle, but you don't accept the fact that God is constantly creating it, it's a misperception. And he continues on, and he says, however, their eyes are blinded from seeing the great difference between the work of man and the making of heaven and earth. The work of man consists of fashioning one existent thing out of another already existent thing, merely changing the form and appearance, e.g., processing silver into a vessel. Creating heaven and earth, however, is creating something out of nothing. That's why it's called in the Latin creatio ex nihilo. There was no existence. The word of God is what brought it into being. When something is created out of nothing, if the power of the creator is withdrawn from the thing created, God forbid, the created being would revert to naught and utter non-existence. The activating force of the creator must continuously be present in the thing created to give it life and ongoing existence. Because the natural state is non-existence, as we mentioned before. The only true existence is the existence of God. Any other existence cannot come into being. But if it comes into being, the only way it can come into being is if it's constantly pulsating with life from God. God is constantly creating it. So if that's the case, then if you look at the screen, it's constantly coming to life. Okay, think about this for a moment. If God is recreating the world at every minute, so this moment that you're in now is also being created, and there's a purpose for this moment. Otherwise, why would God create it? And if there's a purpose in this moment, the question is, how do we utilize this moment? I'm going to read with you a statement from the Rebbe, two statements from the Rebbe, which are quite powerful, but they talk about this in a very strong relation. You know, sometimes we can over philosophize about the moment. Everybody knows the story about Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, that they were out camping out once in the forest, and they had a nice tent, and they had dinner in the tent, and they drank a bottle of wine, got tired and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, Sherlock Holmes wakes up Dr. Watson. He says, Watson, Watson, wake up. What do you see in the sky? So he starts to tell him about all the stars that he's seeing and what it means. And even if he can tell the time by looking at it and how the galaxies are lined up. And he sees God in the creation. And then Watson says to Sherlock Holmes, what are you seeing? He says, I see somebody stole our tent. You know, the fact that you see the sky. So sometimes you forget the moment and you're thinking about, you know, all the big pictures and all the stuff. We have to be able to focus on it. So let's give a look here. Text 8, page 127. Humans, even if they are not in perfect state of balanced mind, with the exception of the truly extreme cases. In other words, there's a recognition there are some people that are not balanced mind. But most of humans will not do anything without a reason and motivation. Certainly, the absolutely perfect creator and director of the universe, who's also the creator and director of each human, does not create an entity that lacks a definite purpose. Each individual day and each and every moment of the cosmic dimension of time is an individually created entity. It therefore follows that the theme and purpose of a specific day is distinguishable from that of every other day in the entire realm of time. In other words, the purpose of any single day in terms of that which God expects us to accomplish is unique. It is unique not only within the week to which it belongs, or that month, or even that year. Rather, our mission in regard to this day is unique among all the days that are supported by the entire dimension of time. The proof is straightforward. God created this day as an individual unit of time. He surely has a unique purpose for this unit of time. This unique creation of his that cannot be accomplished with any other unit of time. Were that not the case, God would have no need for it, and he would not have created it. The task of a Jew was created for the overt goal of serving God, is to utilize each day consonant with God's will through accomplishing the purpose unique to that particular day. This is a very powerful recognition. So in other words, the meditation about the moment is not to escape reality, absolutely not, but to fully invest yourself in the moment and say, what is this moment asking me to do? What is my response to this moment? And that is called a pnimi. I want to talk about this concept of a pnimi. Pnimi, actually, in the modern way of Hebrew, means that it's a secret inside secret. So if you create a publication and you only want inside people to see it in the company or in the firm, you write on it pnimi. Or the joke goes, if you want everybody else to know about it, you write pnimi. So then everybody wants to know the secret. The vernacular pnimi, in the Hasidic vernacular, the word pnimi actually means someone that is totally engaged inside. You don't see anything external about that individual. The person is totally invested, totally immersed in it. That's called pnimi. I'm soon going to tell you a story about that, which is quite fascinating. What does it mean, a pnimi? So let's give a look. The Rebbes of Chabad would have Farbrengens. The Farbrengens were times that they would assemble, and the highlight of the Farbrengen was when the Rebbe would say a discourse. And the discourse was a revelation of the most intense, melodic, beautiful, deep concepts of Hasidic thought. And during that time, when people were listening, they were transported into a different world, both intellectual, emotional, and one that resonated with their spiritual soul on the highest level. But you couldn't just have the discourse recited. There was always a nigun. A nigun was a melody called Nigun Hachana. And if you Google Nigun Hachana on the video, you will see that before the Rebbe recited a Maimer, they would have a Nigun. And during this Nigun, everyone would meditate and they would rise to listen to the Maimer. So once by the fifth Chabad Rebbe, who would say very long, deep Maimarim, the story goes the following. The Rebbe tells the story. Page 128, text 9. There's a famous saying of the fifth Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Dovber, that a pnimi, a person of profound internal integrity, is fully immersed or fully invested in each and every undertaking. I like the word immersed a little bit better, but they translate it as invested. Totally immersed in every undertaking. At one of his public gatherings, Rabbi Shalom Dovber sensed that his younger students were leading the customary singing of a Hasidic melody at a furious pace because they were eager to hear the profound spiritual teachings that were to be delivered following the singing. In response, he devoted an entire address to explaining that a Jew must accomplish each individual undertaking of divine service wholesomely. We may be engaged in an activity that serves merely as a preparatory bridge to a main task. Nevertheless, as long as we are engaged with this particular activity, we must be fully invested in the activity. This is a fundamental principle for all situations, he declared, that wherever you find yourself, you must be fully present. So now we have a new definition of mindfulness. This is the Jewish or the Hasidic ideal of mindfulness, to be fully engaged in the moment, to be fully present, and to be able to feel it. What does this mean? Does this mean that we ignore the past or the future? We can't say that. As an example, if you look at the screen, we have this concept of tshuva. What does tshuva mean? Return, repentance. The reason that you have the icon on the screen of a double knot is because it's explained in Hasidus that when someone commits a grave sin, they actually disconnect themselves from God. It's as if the rope that binds them with God is cut, and then they're disconnected. The act of tshuva is so powerful that it allows you to rebind it, and not only rebind it, but re-knot it with a double knot. We all know that a double knot is even stronger than the rope itself. But in order to do tshuva, you have to reflect on the past. So if you're going to say, I'm only going to live in the present, somebody said, okay, God is recreating the world every minute. So the sin that I did yesterday is washed away. It's no longer here. I'm living in the now. And yet we see that it's not so, that when we do tshuva, we have to reflect on the past. Similarly, we're soon going to see a statement from the Talmud about the future. Foresight of future consequences. A person who's wise, someone that can imagine the future, knows that if they do an act, there are going to be consequences. As you give a look in page 29, this is the famous story with Alexander of Macedonia. You heard of Alexander of Macedonia, the great conqueror. And the story is that he came to Israel. It's a very long story, so we're not going to tell it now because it's a story that's a prelude to Hanukkah. But the story is that he was enthralled with Jewish wisdom. And he made a pact with the Jews to give them freedom, and he will protect them, but he wanted knowledge. And he was meeting with the sages of the day in groups. And one time he met with one particular group, and he says, who do you consider wise? Amrulay, they replied, Ezel Chacham. Who is considered to be a wise person? Haroa et Hanolad. Now, usually what we say, Haroa et Hanolad, means someone that can see the consequences. But if you examine the Hebrew, here Hebrew is very important. What does Haroa et Hanolad mean? What should have been the correct word? If you're speaking Hebrew and you're saying, who is the Chacham? The one that sees the future. How would you say it in the proper Hebrew? Haro'eh et ha'atid, the one that sees the future. Atid is the future. What was the word that the sages said? Haro'eh et hanolad. What does nolad mean? The future that is born of the present. So what does this mean? Actually, if I can have your attention for a minute, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Leadi in another place says, what does it mean, Oroa? The one that can see the words of God, the creative power that's constantly creating the world at every moment. That person is wise. But we know that the past and the present and the future are all very important. So when we say living in a moment, it doesn't mean to negate the past or not to think about the future. What does it mean? It means the following. When you're living in the moment that you're in now came about because of the past, and it will give birth to the future. But at the same time, you have to apply a Jewish ideal in how to engage. And the engagement is the following. This that is within my control, I will deal with and I will take control over it. This that is not in my control, I will have faith in God. I'm going to give you an example before we go to this question. If you're dealing with someone that's going through a tremendous challenge, or if you're going through a challenge, I know that many of us have had challenges. You have a child, unfortunately, that's terminally ill, and you're trying to do everything you can. And unfortunately, my wife and I were in that situation many years ago. And I remember when the news hit us, it hit us like a sledgehammer. You know, you're totally paralyzed. And we talked through it the entire night. And then we made a decision, and we said the following. That which is within our control, we're going to engage in it totally. We're going to do everything we can. We're going to look for the best hospital. We're going to look for the best doctors. We're going to be involved in the discussion with the doctors, be there to support them and to support our child. And we won't leave a stone unturned to find the best remedy and the best that we can. But this that's not within our control, we're not going to worry about. That we're going to surrender to God and let God take care of it. And that was the only way we were able to survive. The same thing is here. When you're looking at the moment that you're in now, and let's say it's a moment that is a consequence of something that happened in the past. So you have to think about what can I do about the past to make this moment better? Or what can I do now to make tomorrow better? So you're going to ask the question, can I do anything now to help a future problem? Can I do anything now to repair the past? If yes, then allow those into the now. But if it's something that you can't have control over, keep it out of the now. So if you're going to worry about something in the future that you have no control over, then you are undoing the present moment. You're not living in the moment now. But if there's something that the now can help for the future, meditate on that and say, yes, I'm going to do this now. That can help the future. If there's a now that can repair the past, if I said a word that was not taken well by another person and I'm reflecting on it now, make the resolution that I'm going to go and ask them forgiveness and say that I meant something else and I really apologize, whatever it is. But don't fret over it and say that the whole world fell into disrepair because of that. And this also explains what we learned before from the Talmud when it quotes Ben Sirah. Give a look on page 130. The directive to anticipate consequences does not contradict the statement of Ben Sirah quoted in the Talmud, grieve not over tomorrow's woes, for you know not what the day may bring. It's stated similarly in the Talmud, those with bread in their basket for today's meal, who say, what will I eat tomorrow, exhibit diminished faith. There is no contradiction, because we're supposed to consider the future and set plans in motion that will rescue us from future harm. But concerning that which is not within our control, we should have full confidence in God and not worry about it. That is the application of faith. Living in the moment is not an escape, but it's also not abdicating our responsibility. It's also not denying the meaning of life. Meaning, living in the moment sees that God is giving us now fresh energy. He's giving us a renewed contract on life. It's something brand new. It gives us the energy to undo the past, and it gives us the energy to prepare for tomorrow. And when you do that, that is powerful. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper which is not in the text. I want you to bear with me. When we say that God is constantly creating the world, and it's a dynamic energy that's flowing, which means that there's new energy that's coming into the world. What happened to the past energy? What happened to the moment before? Think about that for a second. If we say that the existence of the world is totally dependent on God, and if God is not creating it, it doesn't exist. So the fact that God is creating this moment, that's why this moment exists. What happened to the previous moment? And we say, not only that, we say that if God is not creating it, that means that that creation returns to the way it was before creation, as if it never existed. Think about that for a moment. If God withdraws that power of that creative power, what happens? It's not only that it doesn't exist anymore, but it doesn't exist in such a state as if it never existed, which means, according to that the previous moment never existed. The truth of the matter is that the Rebbe, in a brilliant essay that he delivered in 1969, says that that's not true. Because in the moment that God is creating now, he's also creating the past as well. Everything that existed before is being recreated again, but is being recreated as a past experience. So it's not that it's changing nature, it's sustaining nature, but it's sustaining nature just the way nature is. So therefore the past is also there. And therefore the future is also there. It's all being created at the same time. Think about it. So in other words, if this cup is here, it's being recreated every moment, but the fact that it was here a moment ago is also being created now. It's a deep philosophical concept to understand, but it means that you have such power on the past. And that explains why in Judaism, the power of tshuva is so powerful that it can erase a past sin. No other society or theology has that. It's not just that God forgives and pretends that if it never happened. If you give a look in the laws of tshuva, it says that true tshuva is so powerful that it erases it as if it never happened, that it didn't exist. Because the new creation of tshuva, the creation of the new moment after you do tshuva, actually doesn't create the past sin. It's dropped. It's as if it never happened. That's how powerful creation is. So you think about it, that the moment that's being created now is so powerful that it not only is powerful for the now, but it also includes within the whole past, and it gives you a control over the past, and it even gives you a control over the future. It's a very deep philosophical concept, but if you focus and meditate on it, you realize the power that God has given us in this moment. I will share with you a story that we heard from the Rebbe in 1970. In 1970 was the 20th anniversary of the passing of the previous Rebbe, and it was also the 20th anniversary of the Rebbe accepting the leadership. The Rebbe allowed a Torah that was started by his predecessor to be completed. It was an amazing event which lasted for over a week, over 10 days. People came from all over the world to be for those days with the Rebbe. And I remember it was just like, it was an experience that when I think about it even today, it's just like mind-boggling. But I remember after all the excitement on the 20th of Shvat, 10 days after that, was that night, that evening, a lot of guests that had come from Israel were flying back to Israel. And the Rebbe had a special farbrengen in honor of that. And it was about 3:15, 3:30, somewhere in the afternoon. Then their flight was just a few hours later out of Kennedy Airport. And the Rebbe was delivered a discourse, and then the Rebbe spoke. And in the middle, he said that I have to say that I'm in admiration of all the people assembled here, that I've noticed that nobody looked at the clock to see what time it is and to worry that they soon have to get to the airport. And he said that this is called success in time. You're totally invested in the now. And he gave a story, and this is a story I want to share with you. The story was that going back in the days of the Soviet Union and Russia, the previous Rebbe had a meeting scheduled out of town with a visiting foreigner who was a capitalist, which was against the Soviet rules, but he wanted to get support from him for the Jewish cause. And the previous Rebbe was seeing people, and then after he saw people, it was 15 minutes before he had to get to the train station, and he was sitting in his bureau, in his office, and he called in the Rebbe, and he began to talk about a project that he was working on. And the Rebbe says to him, I know that Hasidus teaches you how to meditate. I know Hasidus teaches you how to be calm and to be in control and to meditate how to live in the moment. But I know how dangerous your mission is, and you have to catch a train soon. Ad kedei kach, the Rebbe said, so relaxed are you? So you know what the Rebbe answered? I want you to listen to this because there was a great Jewish sage by the name of the Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet. And this Rashba was a physician. He was a scientist. He gave 3 major lectures every day. He healed people. He was a writer of responsa. He would respond to thousands of letters. In fact, a lot of the writings of Rashba are used today. And his students asked him, how was he able to manage it? And he also slept every night, a full night's sleep. And it was called Hatzlacha in time. Hatzlacha in time means success in time. When he was involved in writing his responsa, nothing else existed except the writing of responsa. When he was seeing patients, nothing else existed except the patients. When he was preparing for his lecture, nothing else existed but the lecture. When he actually gave the lecture, nothing else existed but his students. And when you're involved in such a way and you're not distracted, you block out the time, you're able to focus on the time and make it not only manageable, but make it successful. And then you're not distracted by any other things. So what we learn here is that the true meditation of time is to focus not on an escape mechanism and focus on a mechanism that allows us to escape, but rather how to make time count. We have to understand time and understand what it means and how to utilize every moment. And when we're living in that moment, it gives us a certain sense of control and relaxation. Now we're going to reveal to you a very interesting secret. Some of you that come to synagogue on Shabbat, this Shabbat is Shabbat Mevorchim, the Shabbat we bless the new month. And one of the things that it says that before Rosh Chodesh on the Shabbat, we bless the new month. And then either the rabbi or the gabbai makes an announcement and says the precise time of the birth of the moon will be in Jerusalem on this day at this hour, so many minutes past the hour, and so many parts. What are the parts all about? Maimonides explains that every hour has 1,080 parts, which is not just the 60 seconds, but it's even divided even more. We're going to discuss that because now we're going to understand how this the new creation actually effectuates time and how time is meaningful. So this is a powerful exploration here. So let's talk about this. If everything in the universe was to freeze, we would say, what would we say about time? The time has stopped. Time is change. The definition of time is the definition of change. A little girl once complained. She says, I don't understand this time. Every time I ask what time it is, I get a different answer throughout the day, right? Because time is all about change. How does this change of time, when we say time is a creation, what does it mean that time is a creation? How is time created? The mechanism of time being created is actually fascinating. It's rooted in God's renewed energy, and it's rooted in the name of God, and each moment is different. Let's give a look how it's explained. So here we're going to do a little bit of an exploration of the divine creation of time. Page 131, text 12. The distinctions between the temporal dimensions of the past, present, and future And all the variety of events throughout the progression of time are determined by the differences and combinations of the letters of the divinely creative speech, which symbolizes the specific divine creative force that God invests in creation. What does this mean? There are a lot of explanations to this. So let me talk about this in general terms. When we talk about time units, talk about a cycle of time units. The easiest cycle of time units that we can talk about is a year. A year is one time unit. That's why the calendar changes once a year. In Judaism, it changes on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is called the head of the year. What does it mean that's the head of the year? That the first day of the year encapsulates within it the rest of the days, okay? So you have, Rosh Hashanah is a year. In the year, you have a breakdown of the definition of the time of the year, and that is a definition of 12. And those are the 12 months of the year, right? Then in the 12 months of the year, you have days, and the days are 30, on average 30 days of the year, which is another breakdown. You go further, you say that there is the 7 days of the week. You go further, you say that in every day there is 24 hours. In every hour, there are seconds, there are minutes, then there are parts. Let's try to understand what it is. In fact, one of the reasons that we pray on Rosh Hashanah for the full year is because since the time of Rosh Hashanah encapsulates the rest of the year, so it encapsulates everything, that all the energy that God is going to reveal during the year. So for that reason, we pray for that. But then it's subdivided into even more. We're going to give you one example here, which is quite interesting. And that's the 7 days of creation. 7 days of creation is just used as an example, then we're going to go into the hours. We mentioned in one of the previous classes that in Hebrew, the days are known by their numerals, right? So Sunday is not called Sunday the way we do it in English, or Sonntag the way you do it in German or in Yiddish. How do you say Sunday in Hebrew? Yom Rishon. What does Yom Rishon mean? The first day. Monday is Yom Sheni. And this is from the Bible. Okay? Actually, the Bible, it says Yom Echad, but we're not going to go into that right now, why it says Echad, but the vernacular of today is Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni. Today is Tuesday. Tuesday is referred to as Yom Shlishi. Every week, we go again, and we say Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, until we come to the 7th day. The 7th day is called Yom Shabbat. So the question is, why do we Jews constantly say in Hebrew, the first day, the second day? It's not the second day of creation. The world, even according to the Jewish calendar, is 5,782 years old. So why are we still saying the first day and the second day? And the answer is because each day has its unique dimension. Please look at page 132. You will see figure 41, the daily divine energy. The world was created to the prison of the 7 divine characteristics, which is the Sphirot, that were the building blocks of God's diverse creation. Number 1 is Yom Rishon, which we know as Sunday, is Chesed, divine kindness. God created a light on the first day that was shining illuminated from one end of the world to the other end of the world. And he said, I saw it was good. The second day, what does it say about the second day of creation? Division. God divided from the upper to the lower. That's Gevura, strength. And that's why in the second day, it doesn't say that it was good. The third day is Tiferet, which is harmony, compassion, mercy. Tiferet is the fusion of 2 opposites. That's why it says twice, and it was good. The 4th day was Netzach, which is victory and ambition. The 5th day is Hod, which is splendor and humility. The 6th day is connection, which is Yisod. And then kingship and royalty is the Shabbat queen, receptiveness, which is Shabbat. This happens every day of the week. For that reason, the Talmud says that if you're going to start and venture on a business, do it on a Tuesday because it's a blessed day. It says if you want to do something, don't do it on a Monday. The Kabbalistic scholars always looked at the day and said this day is a day that's best. Now, by the way, it has to be also balanced that if the only opportunity to buy the house or buy the business on a Monday is Monday, and if you lose the deal on Tuesday, don't be foolish and say, I'm not going to do it because it's Monday. But basically, every day has its energy, okay? So when you look at the energy of the day is a chesed day. I remember in 1986, the Rebbe began a custom that every Sunday he would walk out of his room after davening and stand in the little in the little vestibule, and thousands of people would file by, and he would give them $1 that they should give to tzedakah. And years later, he explained because Sunday is a day that's disposed to chesed. It's good for kindness, love, giving. So he would do it on Sunday. Now we're going to learn something even more, and that is figure 2 on page 133. The name of God, which is the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, is a code for different energy forms, depending how you combine it numerically or in what order they are. And here's a fantastic statement. The combination of letters in the divine name are connected with the 12 months of the year and also with the 12 hours of the day. Not only that, the Alter Rebbe writes that in the daytime, the 12 combinations are the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, and the nighttime is the Adnai, the Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, another name from God, which means to say that every hour has a different combination. We're going to soon see that every minute has a different combination. I want to just say this, that a story with Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the author of this statement, a fascinating story that happened with him, and that was that when there were people that claimed that his teachings is not rooted in Judaism, they began a whole campaign against him. And the Tsar had ordered him to be incarcerated to investigate him. And what they used to do in Russia in the olden days, and I don't know if they do it in other prisons, is they used to keep the inmates in windowless cells. And they never knew when, and they took away their watches from them. There was no clock. And they created different orders of the day. So they can serve breakfast at 7 o'clock in the evening and lunch at 2 o'clock at night, or vice versa. And this was a way to disorient the inmates, so when they would have them questioned, they would be totally discombobulated and be very vulnerable. And one time, the Tsar disguised himself as an officer because he heard of the Alter Rebbe's wisdom and he wanted to talk to him. He was fascinated. So he came to him, and the first thing the Alter Rebbe did when he saw him, and he was incognito, wearing a general's garment, and he stood up and he recited the blessing that you recite when you see a king. And then he said, I don't know why the Tsar is up in the middle of the night, because it's 2:45. To which the Tsar said, first of all, how dare you call me the Tsar? Maybe I'm just an officer. So he said that every country has its own angel, and that angel is always on the side of the ruler. When you walked in, I felt the presence of that angel. Secondly, he said that every hour has its particular combination, and the night has combinations of the odd night. And 2 o'clock has a particular combination that I was in tune with, so I knew that it's 2 o'clock at night, that it's 15 minutes past 2. So someone that is that spiritual and that divine and that godly can feel the divine presence. There were scholars that actually were able to feel the moment, not only of the division of time, the way it is the minute, but the division of time of the 1080. Now, here's where I want to say something about the 1080, because that's the 1080 is even less than a second, because there are 60 seconds in an hour. Maimonides, when he discusses the 1080, he says that it's a convenient number because it can divide it in half. It could be divided in fourths, eighths, thirds, sixths, ninths, and tenths. But Kabbalah comes along and says that that's true, but there is even a deeper reason. Give a look, page 134, text number 13. It says the following. It is known that the sages of the tribe of Issachar, there were 12 tribes of Israel. Issachar, they were considered the scholars. In fact, in Divrei, in the book of Chronicles, it says, Umibnei Yisachar Yodeh Bina Li'itim. The children of Yisachar, they had the deep comprehension of time. So what was the time? That they knew and understood how the hour was divided into 1,080 parts, based on that awareness that the sacred name of God can be combined in 1080 unique combinations. Each of these hourly fractions, a new energy emerges from another of these combinations to provide creative energy to the entire cosmos. So if you look at the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is like its own periodic table of elements. Each letter in combination with other letters has so many different substances to it that by the combination of elements, it represents a new divine energy. So basically what you're saying is that each letter is a code for a different energy form. So every hour, there's 1,080 new combinations. Not only that, the sages in Judaism have said that the average amount of breaths, now science says 1,060, Kabbalah says 1,080. Go figure why, pretty close, that the reason that there's 1,000 breaths is because of the 1080 combination. Now, here's where I want to get with the breath. God is breathing as well. When you talk about pulsating means back and forth, like the heart is pulsating. The divine energy that's coming from God in creating the world is like a heart that's pumping air. It's constantly a light that emanates and is withdrawn, a light that emanates and is withdrawn. We see this also in Ezekiel, that it speaks about the divine angels. So it says, "V'hachayot ratzui v'shuv." The angels are running, leaning, and returning. Everything is pulsating, and that's the way breath is. According to Kabbalah, the reason that the heart pumps this way and the breathing is up and down, back and forth, is because that's the way the divine energy is entering into the world. And it means that every second, not only every second, every millisecond, every part, there's a new divine energy that's coming in, and each of these divine energies has its own purpose. Now, it's very hard for us to stop and freeze that frame of a particle of a second and say that we can focus on that. The reason that we're sharing this information with you is to explain that there's purpose in every second. There's definitely purpose in every minute. There's definitely purpose in every hour. Let's give a look the way the sages describe it in terms of creation. The reason why we must breathe constantly at an approximate rate, this is page 135, text 14. The reason that we must breathe constantly at an approximate rate of 1080 breaths an hour is that the divine energy pulsates throughout all the spiritual worlds and energizes everything. As the verse states, using the present ongoing tense, you give life to all things. This is also taken from the daily morning. As this energy arrives in our physical universe, it manifests within humans and within every breathing creature in the air that we breathe, which provides life as we draw it into ourselves, because a fresh burst of divine energy is released at each moment. We need to continuously breathe to absorb the fresh spirit of life that is now radiating forth from God. We cannot remain animated in the present moment with the energy of the previous moment, since the world has moved on to a new energy and a fresh dynamic that has redefined all of existence. This is the way the world operated since its creation, and this is how it will continue until the end of time. The next reading also says this is the reason why it says that we need to praise God on every breath. What does it mean we praise? It says, Kol haneshama ta'aliyah hallelujah. Every soul has to praise God. What it means is that every breath has in it the letters of God's name in it that are causing it to come, and that means that we recognize God. And if we recognize that every moment is a gift from God, how can we make that moment a negative moment? is that number one, each breath is a new lease on life given to us for a purpose. So when we live with the moment, it gives us the ability to repair the past, to prepare for the future. But it's not an escape. It's actually living in the moment. When we stop, I want to go back to what the Baal Shem Tov said before. When we're doing things, be meticulous, be thoughtful about it. Don't do it in a haphazard way. If you can't do it that way, then don't do it at all. But if you're going to do it, be engaged, be involved. If you're involved with a conversation with the person, don't think about your next appointment. Don't think about where you got to run. Say, I got to run, we'll make time and we're going to talk. Sit down and have the proper discussion. Give it the proper attention. When you're davening, you're praying, think about the words. Meditate on the words. See what it does for you. And when you are engaged in that level, I'm going to finish with this story. I mentioned before that the Rebbe started this tradition in 1986 of greeting thousands of people and making each one his emissary to give tzedakah and give them a dollar bill. And people will come from all over the world to be there. And out of respect, people didn't go every Sunday. So this way, an average 5,000 or 6,000 people would pass by, and it took a good few hours. Now, each person, as they passed by the Rebbe would lock their eyes on them, and they were the only person that was in existence at that time. You can see it from the videos, totally engaged, even if it was for 30 seconds or 5 minutes, whatever it was. Huh? It happened to you. You were the only person in the world. And I saw this. I was standing in line, and in front of me was, maybe she was 12 years old, a little girl, 12 years old. She had a little issue that she brought up to the Rebbe. Maybe a family member was sick and she was crying. And the Rebbe had this look with a smile, but he was totally looking at her and listening to her. There was a VIP door that they allowed special VIPs not to have to wait for 5-6 hours. And the mayor of New York was there with his whole entourage, with police protection, Mayor Koch, his honor, as they say. And he stood in line, maybe not the 5 hours, but he stood in line. Now, usually when a person in New York, the mayor is king. So when he would walk in, everybody would stop, push everybody aside, the mayor's here. The Rebbe did not even lift his eyes for a second. The only person that was there was that person that he was talking to. When he finished with that person, the person moved on. The Rebbe lifted his eyes. There was the mayor. He engaged with him, finished with him, went to the next person. That's the concept of a pnimi. Pnimi means totally immersed, and there's no outward motion. Even when the Rebbe would daven, when the Rebbe would pray, you didn't see any outward motion, but he was totally engaged. That's why when the Rebbe began to publish in the 40s, each of the Rebbes had what was called an outer frame that became their distinct design. Now, the Rebbe wasn't Rebbe yet, and they went to the previous Rebbe and they asked him, what frame design should we use for your son-in-law? And the previous Rebbe said, my father was a pnimi, and he is a pnimi. My father, when he was immersed in something, he was totally immersed in it, and so is he. Use the same frame. And you'll see that all of the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe's books and the Rebbe's book have exactly the same frame on it. So that's the idea of a pnimi. The idea of pnimi means to be totally involved. I remember once during davening in the main synagogue, the main sanctuary, the Rebbe was in his place praying, and there was some furniture that they had piled up for a future event, benches, and some of them came crashing down. Nobody was hurt, but they came crashing down. It made a huge, huge crashing sound like a tornado. And the whole synagogue stopped, and everybody was looking to see. The only one that didn't turn around as if nothing happened, because he was totally focused on the davening, was the Rebbe. And even though you didn't see any outward motions from him, a movement, but he was totally involved, hyper-focused in his activity. And that's called living with the moment. And if we can take that away and meditate on that, it helps us reframe how we deal with pressure and how we deal with scattered soul and the scattered brain. Thank you very much. We will see you next week. And next week, we will see how in the mundane we can actually include it.